Hello, everyone, and welcome to our presentation. My name is Janine Donnelly. I am the manager of webinars for IBM Systems Magazine, and I will be the moderator for today's event. Today's webinar, IBM I Web Development, Common Myths Debunked, is sponsored by LANSA. We are delighted to have Steve Will with us today. Steve is the chief architect for the IBM I operating system. He's an award-winning speaker and one of the most sought-after voices at customer briefings and events. Today, Steve will share why IBM I is such a great web application platform. Then we'll turn it over to David Brault, LANSA's product manager. David has over 20 years of application development experience, including extensive involvement integrating IBM I applications with various Windows, web, and mobile technologies. David will discuss some of the common misconceptions about developing web applications. And then from there, LANSA product specialist Tom Cremieux will demonstrate how LANSA makes web development easy. Tom has been involved in multiple modernization, integration, and development implementations utilizing various platforms, an array of tools, including Net, Java, PHP, HTML, Bootstrap, and LANSA. And with our introductions complete, Steve, I'll turn the presentation over to you.
Thanks, Janine, and hi, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to get to present a little bit of an intro in front of this presentation today to talk about IBM I as a great web application platform. You know, our platform has been around for a long time, certainly longer than the web has been around. And over the years, many people have continued to develop applications the way they always have. And then when their business, their executives start asking whether or not their platform can do web applications, sometimes people are a little unsure of how it can be done or whether the platform can do it at all. I want to assure everybody that we've been investing in this platform for a decade and a half to make sure that it is, in fact, a great web application platform. We do that because this platform has come from a legacy of being a business application platform. And while at the very beginning of the AS400, there weren't such things as web applications, as the industry grew and IT grew, of course, web applications became one of the de facto standard styles of applications. And so we've been investing in integrating into our platform the necessary technologies to be able to do all sorts of business applications, and that certainly includes web applications. Again, if you've been a customer of ours for a long time, you may have been one of the first people to try out some of the web browsing capability that we allowed with the web servers we initially created probably 15 years ago now. And over time, we've adopted more and more standards, applied more and more resources to make things perform and connect to the back end, all for the purposes of being able to do great business applications through any mechanism that you want, and certainly through the web, since that's one of the most common ways of attaching to business applications these days. Now, we do it, as you would expect from this platform, in an integrated way. The integration that we've always been known for since the days the platform was first created has evolved over time to include more and more things that are required by business applications. But one of the key things that's on this chart is that Apache feather there, that open source web server that so much of the web is built around. Now, there are many kinds of web servers you can pull in and use, but Apache is absolutely the most commonly used one. We've embedded and integrated into our security model and our data model and our file system model the Apache web server for well over 10 years now. We've done that, as I said, because as the most common way of attaching things, it is the way that is most easily done by somebody who doesn't know anything about our platform. Now, right next to that, by the way, on this integration chart is the AIX chart. Most of you probably are aware we have an AIX runtime that runs inside of IBM I, and we do that specifically so that we can pull in common elements that are needed for web applications that need to run in some sort of Unix environment. You don't usually have to know anything about that, but between Apache and that AIX background environment that we have, called PACE, we're able to serve up in a very high-performance, high-throughput way web applications that are developed by our clients and our ISVs. Now, our strategy, and one of the reasons I'm talking today before you start hearing from the LANSA folks, our strategy includes being able to do compilers and languages, tools in open source such as Apache, to allow people to develop the kind of applications that they need. We integrate that technology, the web and development technologies, into IBM I so that you don't have to do that. But a very important part of our strategy has been, since the beginning of this platform, that we, the operating system, can't do it all. And we, in IBM, don't try to tell you that there is one and only one way to do things. We partner with vendors who have tools that can apply this integrated technology in several different ways so that you can find the approach that fits best for you. And that's one of the reasons why I'm part of this webcast today, to explain that we've been preparing this platform to be a platform that does applications, in particular web applications, and our partners like LANSA have taken advantage of that and have extended what we can do through what they do. Now, a lot of what people do when they do web applications, of course, is modernization. I do like to point out that while many of the initial views of modernization come through that user experience, there are other factors to modernization that you'll want to consider. So as you're thinking about what this tooling is providing you today and what the operating system can provide for you, it isn't just about what the user interface looks like. It's about how the user uses the system, how the database underneath can be factored to be able to provide the kind of information easily and quickly that a web application might need to do. And then the ability to create code that you're going to be able to use in multiple ways and extend easily. This, over the years, has been one of the most difficult parts of being a formerly AS400 development code owner, is that in the old days, people didn't write very flexible code. There is nothing inherent about the coding languages that we use, such as RPG, that makes them inflexible. It's just that the style of writing code in the old days was relatively inflexible because people were trying to meet different needs. These days, in the days of web application development, if you're writing code in any language, but certainly in RPG, you can make it as flexible, modular as you want it to be. So modernization is more than just this user experience, though that is the most obvious thing. It's also about making sure that you're writing code in the right way so that you can be flexible and so that you can take advantage of the database as it is offered in IBM I. Now, as I've been alluding to, we don't do everything within IBM ourselves. The IBM I operating system is a bunch of integrated technology, and what we're trying to do is extend that value out through the partners that we have using that integrated technology. So whether you're doing web access, mobile access, whether you're trying to do things with cloud or analytics, we partner with people like LANSA to be able to get you the solutions and the tools that you need. Now, specifically today, I do want to remind people that RPG is the most commonly used language on IBM I. And it is still our strategic base language, but it's not the only language that we have. Nevertheless, I continue to talk to clients, particularly clients who haven't been hearing from us for the past 5 or 6 years, who think that maybe RPG is no longer being enhanced. It's sometimes called a dead language. That's what they're worried about. Well, it is the furthest thing from dead. It is very alive. We, within IBM, are enhancing it to be a modern, powerful language. And, of course, there are partners who are out there extending it beyond that and making it possible for people to continue to do marvelous things in RPG. Now, RPG is one option. There are a bunch of other options, usually related to open source languages, and so we invest in those as well. You can do web programming in a lot of different ways, but I just want people to remember that we are continuing to keep RPG alive, vital, and able to do any kind of application programming that you might want. So as you're looking at doing any sort of web application on this platform, because we have integrated Apache and integrated it into, as I mentioned before, our security model, our data model, our file structure model, because we have that integrated, it is ready to do web applications no matter what kind of language, what kind of tool set that you might want to take advantage of. And though people may not initially think of it as being an RPG and web application platform, it certainly can be that. When we celebrated our 25th birthday back in from 1988, so 3 years ago now, we called out the fact that one of the key factors in our success has been our ISVs, the ISVs who create solutions for our clients, but also who create the tools that help extend the value of the platform out into the newer solutions that people want to create. That, again, is why I'm here talking to you today in conjunction with what LANSA is going to show you, because this is a key part of our strategy. We're not telling you where to go, but we are showing you that with our partners, you can do a lot of things, including showing that IBMI is a great web development platform. That's the end of my presentation. I think we'll turn it over now to David.
Thanks so much, Steve, and welcome, everyone. Hopefully everybody sees my screen. Today we're going to be talking about some of the most common myths associated with web development, and then we're going to demonstrate how LANSA's web tools helps debunk them. Now, speaking of myths, there's a famous quote from JFK where he talks about how the great enemy of truth is not lies, which are deliberate, contrived, and dishonest, but myths, which are persistent, persuasive, and unrealistic. Now, even though this quote at the time was referring to the Cold War, it still rings true today with web development as well. How so? Well, let me explain. There are many persistent and unrealistic myths about web development that persuade companies into believing that either one, they don't have the skills to build today's modern web applications, or two, that web applications they're still not powerful enough for heavy-duty, power user-style applications. These myths, what they do is they act as a roadblock. They stop developers and they stop companies from achieving their true potential. Now, the three myths that we're going to cover today are, and they're in no particular order, that web developers must code in many different languages and technologies, that performance-wise browser applications perform slower than desktop applications, and last, that web applications were never intended for the back office. So now that we have our list of myths, let's start debunking them. So myth number one, developers must code in multiple languages to build modern web applications. Today's web developers are expected to have expertise in multiple languages. Now, I've witnessed this myth firsthand because I talk to a lot of would-be web developers at Common and other regional conferences, and when I ask them about their plans, they tell me that, I'm going to continue developing an RPG, but I'm going to learn PHP as well. So when I explain to them that you don't learn just PHP, that you also have to learn HTML and JavaScript and CSS, and if they want to have the application look nice and be mobile responsive, they'll probably have to use something like jQuery and Bootstrap. And if they want the application to behave and perform like a modern web application, they'll have to decide on some sort of open source framework like maybe Angular or React. They'll have to have a solid understanding of AJAX and JSON, possibly XML for the asynchronous communication. And they're going to have to know how to build RESTful web services. And I can literally see the enthusiasm fade from their eyes. But the good news is, there is good news, and that fact is that web development doesn't have to be this way. So after I explain to these attendees how LANSA has changed the game of web development by allowing them to use a single language on the client side, the server side, and everything in between, you can start to see the excitement return. And this excitement isn't relegated to beginners only. Even experienced web developers, especially the ones who can't keep up with every web technology, and they're just tired of constantly chasing the latest open source framework of the month, these experienced developers really appreciate what we have to offer as well. How can we accomplish this? Well, we accomplish this because LANSA is a development platform. We're not a code generator per se. Unlike most of the other web tools in the market, we don't spit out a bunch of web code that you then have to maintain. With LANSA, all of your development, all your syntax checking, designing, debugging, testing, maintenance, it's all performed within the LANSA environment. Just like you never drop down into the technologies that LANSA leverages, just like you never have to drop down into the object code that RPG creates. So with LANSA, you literally never see a single line of HTML or JavaScript or CSS or PHP or whatever ever again. All right, myth number 2, that web apps are much slower than desktop applications. For the longest time, old school web applications, they just couldn't match the performance of a desktop application because they had this click and wait architecture that required a round trip call to the server and a page refresh every time the user needed to do something. Well, with the advent of single page applications, or SPAs for short, those click and wait days are gone. And more importantly, the margin of difference performance-wise has been greatly reduced. How is that so? Again, let me explain. So when you compare an SPA to an old school web application, the very first time that you run an SPA, the web server returns the entire web application to the client, not just the first page of HTML. And this is important for a couple of reasons. First, SPAs behave like a client-server application because the only time the app calls the server is to grab data or maybe to call some server-side routines. And it uses a lightning-fast AJAX call to do so. Second, since the code is running client-side in the browser, screen changes are instant because SPAs can now update any portion of the UI dynamically without having to go back to the server and, more importantly, without having to refresh the screen. Now, because of these two features, the performance of an SPA can start to rival that of a desktop client-server application. Now, the benefit that LANSA brings to the table is that anyone can build an SPA without having to know anything about AJAX or JSON or any sort of open source SPA framework. All right, moving on to the last myth of the day, and that's that web applications, there's a misconception that web applications are best suited for things like e-commerce or maybe some customer/partner-facing applications, that they're not intended for the back office. And as we kind of touched on with SPAs, that's not the case anymore. There are companies out there that they're starting to build very robust SPAs. They're patterned after desktop-style applications, and they possess a similar performance and a similar behavior as those desktop applications. Now, what LANSA has is we have an application framework. We call it the Visual LANSA framework. You may hear me call it the VLF for short as we progress here, but it's quite unique because it greatly accelerates the pace at which companies can build web-based back-office applications and get them into production quickly. Now, Tom's going to show you an example. Besides building an application from scratch, he's also going to show you an example of the Visual LANSA framework application, how it looks. And more importantly, he'll show you all the features that are built into the framework that you don't have to code, things like searching and navigation, security, all the intercommunication between panels, and its ability to multitask. So what makes this framework unique is that it provides you, as a developer, with all of your application's infrastructure and plumbing code, simply by running through a question and answer process. And by giving you that head start, instead of you writing all these lines of code, you can now spend more time on the parts of the application that matter, i.e. the user interaction. All right, speaking of Tom, at this point in time, I'll pass control over to him so he can demonstrate how LANSA's web capabilities will debunk all of these myths. Tom, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Dave, and thank you all for being here with us today. Let me share my screen. Okay. So I have quite a few exciting things to show you today. And so you can start to get a better feel for how easy it is to develop, to give you an idea of how easy it is to develop applications with LANSA. I want to start by building a web application from scratch, using no HTML, no JavaScript, no CSS, and no PHP. So what we're going to be building is similar to what I'm displaying on my screen right now. Let's take a quick peek at what that is. So it's a fairly simple application that works with customers. Off to the left, we have a list, and to the right, we have details of a customer. Now, when I select the customer, we see their details displayed off to the right. The significance here is we're not refreshing the entire browser when we're selecting different customers. if I click on the map icon next to the customer, we see their location displayed in the map. Now, LANSA has things that we call a widget, and these allow you to integrate with third-party technologies such as maps. We make that really simple for you. Now, if you're wondering what is controlling all the styling in the application, like the colors for the push buttons and lists and menus and so on and so forth, well, I just mentioned a second ago that we're not hand cranking any CSS in this application. Instead, LANSA has a theme designer, which allows you to create these styles without writing any code. Finally, the last thing to talk about here is that our page is responsive. So if I shrink my browser window down to something more like the size of a phone, you'll see our content is automatically reorganized for us. Our list is at the top, and the details are at the bottom. If I expand this back out, we see that first layout kick in where we have the list on the left and list on the right. And again, I'll show you how we do that without writing any JavaScript or CSS. Okay, so now that we know what we're trying to accomplish, let's take a quick tour of visual LANSA, which is what I'm showing on my screen right now. Now, as a developer, this is where you will spend the majority of your time. So all of your development, all of your debugging, testing, and deployments are all done from here. Now, if you have experience with an IDE in the past, there's very little new to learn here, and this IDE is very customizable, so it can fit however you want things to be laid out. Now, if you haven't used an IDE in the past, don't worry, because it's a very intuitive interface. There's context-sensitive based help throughout everywhere in the IDE, and we have online tutorials to help get you started. Okay, so just taking a peek at what we have in the IDE, off to the left we have what we call the LANSA repository. So this contains everything in your system, whether it be a web application, a Windows-based application, whether it's images, themes, third-party widgets, things like that. It's all accessible from the repository, and also including all the files and fields in your system. So the first step is to create a new web page. And I'll go to my File menu. I'll click New. You see all the new things that we can create. When we're talking about creating a new web page, you see we have some starting templates and layouts to help jumpstart your web development. Let's go ahead and create this application from scratch, and I'll choose a blank page. I'll call this a webinar customer page. And we'll give it a similar description. And when that pops up, what we'll have in the center is a nice blank canvas for us to start working with. So let's focus first on building the client-side interface, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about the server side next. So building screens with LANSA is as simple as dragging and dropping controls onto our screen. And so let me go off to the left here. You see this tab that says Controls. Right now I'm viewing my favorites that I use frequently. Let me go to All Controls, and you can see all the things that I can drag and drop onto my web page. That's things like carousels, checkboxes, drop-downs, menus, so on and so forth. I'll scroll through the list so you can get a feel for what we're talking about here. So let's think about, the first thing that we want to do is get that list of customers on our page. So we have a list control, and I'll drag and drop that onto our page, and I'll resize it however I'd like to start. Okay, so the next thing to do is we have to add controls to this list. And typically those are fields from a file. Let me go ahead and navigate my repository, and let me find my customer files, and those start with L. Just taking a quick step back here, my repository is already populated with files because I've been using LANSA for quite some time now. But the typical starting point in a LANSA project is to take your existing database, whether it be DB2 or SQL Server, MySQL, Oracle, etc., and we make your tables known to LANSA. So this allows you to then create applications against these tables without having to worry about any connections, and you can maintain those files in LANSA without affecting the underlying database. You can add rules to these files, and those are enforced whether it's a Windows web or a mobile-based application. You can also create files from scratch with LANSA, which is what I've done with these customer files, but the development process is exactly the same. And we also allow you to mix and match databases within the same application. So with that said, let's go ahead and add the customer logo as the first column. We have a customer logo file. We find the image field and drag and drop that on. And just like that, we have the customer image. So anything that we select, we view its properties, events, and methods off to the right. So right now I have the image column selected. And let me go ahead and focus on one property here called image sizing. Let me change that to be best fit. And what that does for us is if I expand or shrink the cell space of this image, you see the thumbnail preview fits the space that it has available. Okay, next thing. Let's get the customer ID and name onto this list. Those come from a file called LTC cut. I'll select the customer ID and name, and I'm just going to drag and drop those onto our list. So by doing so, it not only brings along the fields for us, but it brings along everything that LANSA knows about those fields. So what are its attributes? What are its column headings? What's its length? So on and so forth. Everything LANSA knows about it is now brought into this program, and it's all maintained outside of this web application. Okay, let me clean this list up a little bit and resize the column headings. Now, just like before, it's just a matter of setting properties. So whatever we click on, for example, let's click on the customer ID column, and we're now working with those properties. And if a user tells us, hey, I want to be able to sort by that column, you come down to the sort on click property, check the box, so you can specify its direction. That's all you have to do. Let's also give this list a little bit more of a clean look. Right now we have lines separating each column. Let me go ahead and select the list and uncheck the box for column lines, and those go away. Okay, now for the address fields, I could take these address fields highlighting on the left side in my repository and drag and drop those onto my list, but we just did that with the customer ID and name, so let's do something a little bit different. Let me go out to my repository. I'm going to go out to my list of favorites. So these are things that I use frequently in applications. I'm going to take this address component that I've created ahead of time, and I'm just going to drag and drop it onto my list and resize it so it fills the entire width of our list. So let's talk about what we just did there. All this component does is it collects the address fields and displays them from top to bottom with a link out to a map. But the significance here is that we allow you to break your application up into components. So everything in a page can be its own part. Now, thinking about this from a development standpoint, you can break your application up into separate components, all defined on their own. And you can use them as many pages as you like. And they're all maintained in a single spot. So thinking about, maybe you have a team of 5 developers. You can all work on the same page without stepping on each other's toes. Okay, so at this point, we have the client side done. Now we have to go out to the server, and we have to grab some data. And we do this by calling a server-side program, something that we call a server module. And this is used to interact with a database. So building these server-side programs is really quite simple with LANSA, less because we have a wizard which takes for input the name of a file, and it generates routines that interact with the specified file, meaning you don't have to hand crank all the database operations. You can modify, of course, whatever the wizard provides for you, but it's a great starting point. Let me go ahead and show you the customer server module. And again, this was built by running through a wizard. And this is the first bit of LANSA syntax you will have looked at to this point. So we have various routines in here to grab all the records with and without keys, as well as doing your updates, inserts, and deletes. And the routine of interest, server-side routine of interest for our example is the one I've highlighted here, and it's called find all, and it simply goes out to the server and grabs all the customers from the LTC cust file and passes it back to the calling program. You see right here, this line says, pass back a list to the calling program. Now, our server-side syntax is very SQL-like. So you see here we have a select statement, and this is a loop, and I'll contract that so you can see the structure of it. Here we'll go out and fetch the customer image, and we'll add it to the list. So that's all we have to do. But what's really cool here is that the server-side syntax is the same language as you would use for everything else. So we have that same skill set for the client side, the server side, and everything in between. And regardless of if this is a web, Windows, or a mobile application, it's the same skill set. The other thing to note is we're not having to code any database connections here. That's all baked into the repository. Okay, so we have this server routine called find all. Now we have to go back to our page, and we want to call it from our page. So to do that, I'll go to the Source tab. Let me go ahead and start. Let me go ahead and start here by creating a method. And you see here, to help you with all the syntax, the IDE has full inline IntelliSense, which has access to everything in the repository. I'll go ahead and create a new method called load customers. The next thing that I want to do is I want to define to this program that server module and that find all routine. And all that does for us is it allows us to interact with that server module in our program. So I'll use a command called define component. It's going to say, well, what are you trying to define? And it goes out to my repository and says, I want to define the customer server module. Within there, we see all the routines it has. We want to use the find all routine. And we give it a name so we can refer to it within our program. Okay, now we have to call that find all routine. So we type find all, and we hit a dot, and we see all the properties, events, and methods that are available for that find all routine. Let's go ahead and use AJAX, and we'll call this asynchronously. So I'll use the execute async command. We'll say the list we get back, called LPC cust list, is going to get passed into the list on our page, called list one. That's just the default name that's given to a list. You can name that whatever you like. But those 4 lines of code are all we have to do to bind the client side to the server side. Okay, so now we have to call this load customers routine, and we'll do that up here in the initialize. So I'll say com self, which is referring to this program. I'll put a dot, and we'll see all its properties, events, and methods. And the moment we just created a message called load customer, so we'll call that. Okay, so we're done here. Now all we have to do is compile our page, which will take our LANSA syntax and generate HTML and JavaScript for us. I'll go ahead and hit the execute button, and it'll pop that page up into our default browser. And there we have our list, exactly how we had defined it with the logo, IDE name. We also have a link out to the map, just like I showed you before. Just as an FYI, everything you develop within LANSA is cross-browser. So you know, this is Chrome, but it could be Firefox, IE, Edge, Safari, so on and so forth. Okay. So we have our page, but we have our list, and it's kind of just floating around in the center of the page how we had to define it. So let's start to organize our page by adding a layout, and then we will position our list where we want it to reside, and then we'll add that page header and details panel into their appropriate location. So let's go back to our IDE, and let's go to the Design tab. So think of layouts like a table where you break your page up into rows and columns, and you position your content in a specified cell. So in our example, I'll go out to the layout ribbon, and I'll create a table layout that has 2 rows and 2 columns. And then I'm going to go ahead and take that list, and I'm going to put it down here in the lower left, row 2, column 1, have it positioned right in the center. I'll have that fit the height and the width of that space. Pretty simple. Now, let's go ahead and reuse that page header that we used in our completed example. That's just a component, again, that's defined outside of our page. I'll drag and drop it onto our page here, and I'm going to lock it into place. Let's go ahead and have that fill the width of our of our page. Okay, now the header is a little bit tall, so why don't we make that a little bit shorter? Right now it's taking up half the height. Make it 120 pixels and lock that into place. Okay, now just to maximize reuse and to save some time, let's go ahead and reuse that same details component that I used in a completed example. I'll drag and drop that onto my page. Now I'll lock that into place in the cell. And all this component does, and for the matter of fact, the header and the details were developed using the same screen painter, the same syntax, and this customer details component takes for input a selected customer, goes out, and it calls a find routine in that same server module I showed you. So there's nothing really new here that we haven't talked about. Now we need to link the list on the left with the details on the right. So when I right-click in the list, you'll see all the events that we can track in a list. Everything from dragging and dropping, hovering, scrolling, touching, so on and so forth. In our case, we want to focus on this item click event. When I select that, it's going to drop this down back into our source tab, and it's going to drop this stub for us. So, like I mentioned, that customer details component takes for input the selected customer. So I'll go ahead and say customer details component has a method in it called load customer. It's going to take the selected customer ID, and that's it. So again, that's all we have to do now to find that list on the left with the details on the right. I will compile my page and go back to my browser, and I'm going to just refresh it so we can get the latest copy of our page. And there we go. We have our header at the top, details on the right, and as I go through my list, select different customers, we see their details displayed on the right. Okay, so we're getting quite a bit closer to the end result, but what happens if I try to run this on a smaller screen, something like a phone? Let me shrink my browser window down to simulate what it might look like on a phone, and you see here right away that it's not horribly mobile optimized. But that really is okay, and it makes perfect sense because the layout that we defined was designed for a widescreen display. And we make this really simple to solve this problem by allowing you to create multiple layouts for a given page. Let's go ahead and create a mobile layout. So we'll focus on a phone here. Mobile layouts tend to have a single column with multiple rows. So I'll go to my layout ribbon here in the IDE, and I'll go ahead and select a table layout with one column with 3 rows. Now, since we have a little bit less real estate, last time we said let's make the top row 120 pixels. Why don't we make that 100 pixels so we can maximize the real estate we might have on our screen? Now, nothing is locked into place here because we took off our layout. So all we have to do now is put everything just like before where we want it to live. So the header goes into row 1, column 1, fit the height and the width of that space. The list is going to go right below that in the second row and first column. Finally, we'll take the details and we'll put that at the bottom. Okay, so we have our second layout. And if I was to take this page and compile it, well, we would have the opposite problem of what we had before. Right? We'd always be looking at this layout. And again, that's okay, because all we have to do is write a tiny bit of syntax that swaps between the 2 layouts, which are called layout 1 and layout 2. Again, just the default names. You can call them whatever you like. So let me go back to my source tab, create a couple blank lines. One of the features that I really love about LANSA is the concept of a code snippet. Now, what a code snippet is in LANSA is a block of code that's defined outside of your programs that can be shared amongst developers, and you can pull these code snippets in as you need it. So it's very useful for commonly used routines, such as swapping layouts. You can just pull it in by saying that the snippet is called layout, and it brings in this code for us. So let's take a quick look at what this syntax is doing for us. This line here says whenever the browser window size changes, and this also executes when the page first loads so it knows what layout to start with. If the width of the browser window is greater than 1250 pixels, which is just the number that I'm using for this example, it could be anything you want, we want to use that first layout, which is the wide layout. Otherwise, we want to use the narrow layout. So that's it. This is all we have to do to bring that nice responsive design to your web applications without writing any HTML, JavaScript, CSS, bringing in any of those other third-party frameworks that you usually need. Let me go back to my browser, refresh my page, get the latest HTML. Let me go ahead and shrink my page down. And now we have that second layout that kicks in. We have our list at the top, details at the right. And as soon as we hit that 1250 number, right, we see that desktop wide layout come into play. Okay, so our application is looking pretty good. However, we haven't applied any color schemes, and it's looking a little bit bland with the gray theme that we have applied. As we mentioned before, themes control the overall application style without you having to hand crank any CSS. So let's go ahead and reuse that theme that I used over here in our completed application in the application we're building together. So I'll go back to my IDE. Let me select the page, and we'll go to our theme ribbon. We see all the different themes that I have enrolled. We also ship some shift some base themes to help get you started. And the one we want to apply here is called the customer theme. And as soon as I select that, notice how everything instantly changes in our application. The menus, the headings, the push buttons, labels, so on and so forth. So everything is consolidated into a single theme object. You don't have to create one-off styles and things like that. Let's go ahead and compile my page and go back to my browser. And as soon as I refresh it, we'll see that theme come into play. So what does a theme look like from a developer standpoint? Well, let's take a quick peek at that. Here's the customer theme, the one that I just applied. At the center of a theme, you see the theme preview, and this gives you a nice overall big picture view of what your application might look like. Now, to help get you started off to the right, we shipped 19 base themes, and if I cycle through them, you'll see the entire theme preview change, as well as the color palette down below. Let's go ahead and choose red. You can also apply a global font and some background settings and things, but we can, of course, do quite a bit more than just change colors. Let me go over to my Styles tab, and you'll see all the different styles that I have enrolled within this theme. So everything from titles and headings to lists and push buttons, it's all consolidated here into a single spot. We're not writing any code to modify it. You just click on a tile, for example, a push button, and you see all the different properties that you have that you can set. For example, let's say we want the push button, instead of being orange, we want it to be blue. You can specify RGB values, you can specify a hex value, and now the push button color has changed. The other benefit that I want to highlight here about a theme is that we give you the ability to see a live preview of what happens with each of these styles. So for example, when I hover over a push button, what we'll see is that it goes to the mouse over style. And when I press on it, it'll go to the selected style. All these have a live preview of what a user would see working with those styles. So okay, I just quickly changed the theme, go back to our page, and I'm just going to refresh our browser. And there's the changes we made to our theme propagated down to the page that uses it. Okay, so with that said, hopefully you can now see how easy it is to build these nice responsive web applications from scratch in LANSA, which are really great for your customer-facing sites and applications for your sales reps and trading partners. So let's move on from this, because we also talk to a lot of people about building a line of business applications, and really specifically, how can my developers, or how can I build a line of business application without spending so much time writing the application plumbing? In addition to that, we also hear a lot of people asking, how can I leverage existing applications I might already have in place? So our solution to this is the Visual LANSA framework, which has all this plumbing built into it, as well as pre-built navigation, searching, menuing, and overall application structure. So you use the same development process I just showed you to build new components, and you just plug them into panels in the framework. Now, I don't have time to build this framework application in front of you. I'd love to show it to you because it's really cool. But let's take a quick look at a completed framework application. Bring up another tab here. I'm going to go into my framework. And I'm going to go ahead and log in as myself. Now, my profile has been configured to show a dashboard after I log in, but this is just an example of what can be here. It's up to you what you put here. It could be a web page, a task list, emails, or something like I'm showing here, such as a dashboard. It's all configurable, and it can be done on a user-by-user basis. Let me go ahead and close that, and you see behind that we have all this white space. This is what we call the application workspace, and this is where the bulk of the interaction takes place in the framework. So as your user is using the application, windows will pop up. They can move them around, and I like to think of it as a user whiteboard. They can put anything they want in there. Okay, so in the upper left, we have the application menu, and you see everything that I'm authorized to work with in this framework. Now, we designed this menu after Office 365 and SharePoint to help lower the training time for a new user. Now, this menu structure is broken up into top-level application categories and subcategories. So if I select something like customer service, you see everything again that I'm authorized to work with in that customer service application, in this case, customers, products, and orders. When I select customers, a search panel pops up, and it's going to take up the left half of my application workspace. Let me go ahead and do one thing here. I'm going to hit F11, and I'm going to take my browser, and I'm going to pop it up into full screen mode. I'm going to maximize the screen real estate that I have. And the reason why I like to do that is because I would really challenge anybody from this point forward who didn't know to tell me that this is a browser-based application, because it looks and it performs like any other desktop application on the market. So the first thing I want to do is I want to search for customers. Let's just type LA in, hit enter, and we see the results on the right side. So this is using that same customer database that I built that the first application with. So some of the things you get out of the box right away with every list in the framework are that every list can be sent to Excel without you writing a single line of code. See that option right here. So from a developer standpoint, it allows you to create quick, easy reports. And just a checkbox to say, I want this list to be sent to Excel. You don't have to write any code to do that. Every list has sorting capabilities. So I can say, let me sort this list by name, let me sort it by city, state, or go back to sorting it by number. And what I think is really cool is the search box in the upper right corner where it says refine list. So I've done my primary search and I've got my list of customers. And now I can use this refine list box to refine that set of data based on anything that's visible there, whether it be the address, phone number, email, or whatever the user wants to search for. So let's say the user is looking for a customer somewhere in the 630 area code, which is the area code I reside in. I just type 630, and you see that list instantly refines without having to go back to the server and refresh anything. It's all responding as I'm typing. So when I find a customer that I want to work with, let's go ahead and pick on LANSA here. It will bring up a series of tabs to the right, consolidating all the information I need to effectively work with that selected customer. So now these windows are taking up half the screen space because if you look right here where my mouse is, I have automatic tiling turned on. I'll come back and turn that off in a second so you see how flexible this user interface is. So the first screen we're looking at here are the customer details. Now this is a new component that I created using the same screen designer and syntax I showed you in the first half of the demo. But the idea here of the framework is we can bring all the information a user needs to work with the selected record, and in this case, a customer, into a single panel off here to the right. So next to the customer details, we have our dashboard, which is another new program that I wrote with LANSA. Next to that, however, we have the customer's website. So think about any existing web applications you might already have. You can pull those into this framework so your user base is not having to jump around into different applications. It's all consolidated into a single application. Next, we have documents, and we can integrate this with any DMS you might have in place. We have notes, we have orders, we have the customer's location displayed in the map. So right next to that, we have a tab called Details 5250. So what this is, what we allow you to do is even bring in existing 5250 applications you might have, navigate to specific screens, hide the menus, and minimize the pain points that users have with navigating a 5250 application. So this right here, like I said, is an existing RPG program that I've navigated to behind the scenes. Okay, so let's say the user didn't mean LANSA. Maybe they meant LA Valley. So we have a couple options at this point. First things first, we'll likely just click on LA Valley, and now we're working with that customer's details, that customer's dashboard, website, so on and so forth. But now let's say that the user wants to be able to compare 2 or 3 or 4 different customers at the same time. There's this spin box right here, and I can increase this to something like 3, and let me take off my refine list so I get a bigger list of customers back. And now when I click on different customers, right, we're now going to see their details pop up in a separate window and go back to LANSA, and we'll see their details pop up in a separate window. So think about, and again, this is all baked into the framework without you having to write a single line of code, but think about being able to compare multiple things at once. Right? It's, again, it's all baked in. So let's say I want to arrange this without, let's say I want to arrange this and turn off tiling. So I turn off tiling, and now we have a free formatting workspace for the users to arrange these windows however they like. And this is remembered on a user-by-user basis, so if I leave and come back, this is exactly how it will be laid out. Let me go ahead and close a couple of these down. Get us back to a nice clean point. Okay, so remember here, I can work with more than customers. I can also work with products. Go to my menu, click on products, and now here I am working with products. Search for products, click on a product on the list. Now we're showing the product details. Now we have 4 windows open, so it might make sense to tile these, so I'll check the box and automatically tile these. 2 more things to talk about how flexible this interface is for a user. This list is designed to have these columns in this order. Let's say the user says, you know what, for me it's really important for me to see the price up front and the stock right after that. Well, the users have the flexibility to lay out your list however they like. Also, one other thing I didn't mention before is all these tabs can be arranged on a user-by-user basis. So let's say a user says, you know what, I want to see my 5250 screen right up front, and I want to see my notes right after that. So you have the flexibility from a user standpoint to set everything up however they want it to be used. Okay. If you remember back to the beginning, we can do more than work with a customer service application. We also have something called a resource application. And here I can work with people, places, and things. Let me click on people, and it's going to bring up a very similar search screen. Search for employees, and we'll view their details. Now, the reason why I like to come here is for 2 reasons. The first being the first reason is that we have a nice, consistent user interface that we have applied throughout the entire framework, so you as a developer don't have to worry about how you want to lay out all of your screens. The second reason is because if I click on this icon here, you see the framework taskbar. These are all the things that I currently have open. So for example, it says I'm working with customer details of LANSA, and I click on that, it transfers me back to that application workspace and picks me up exactly where I left off. So if you have users who are being pulled off frequently throughout the day to do other things, they don't have to worry about losing their work and losing their place. A few more things to talk about. In the upper right corner here, we have an application-wide search. So let's say I'm working here in the customer service application, and somebody gives me a call and says that they want to place a new order. I come up here and type new, and you see all the new commands that I can execute in the framework. One called new order. I click on that, and it pops it up in a new window. I can maximize that, work with it however I like. When I'm done, I can close it and pick up exactly where I left off. Now you can take this one step further, and we can even search the entire framework application. So let's say I want to find employees with the last name of Smith. So like I have a shortcut set up called EMP. It says I want to search for employees with the name of Smith. Type that in, it transfers me over to the corresponding search panel and searches for Smith. And just like before, I can come right back where I left off. Okay, the last thing I want to show you here is if you look off to the left and the bottom, the right to the top, you see as I hover over these panels, they go to gray. When I click on it, you'll see a panel that slides out for me to work with. So these are applications that aren't necessarily connected to what you're working on in the workspace, but it's something that you want users to have at their fingertips. So here I'm showing a list of tasks that are assigned to a user. I've seen customers put stocks in here. I've seen them put email. I've seen them put a chat in here. But again, all these panels can be accessed from anywhere in the framework. It's something you want them to have at their fingertips. So with that said, I am going to pass control back to Dave.
All right, thanks, Tom. Let me share my screen again. So hopefully everybody was able to see the power of LANSA's web technology and why we at LANSA, why we believe this is a game changer. So everything Tom created today was accomplished with a single language, required no additional skill sets. Tom was also able to build a single-page application. Again, these are web apps with a desktop-style performance and user experience, and he was able to do so straight out of the box without knowing anything about SPAs. And last, Tom showed you the Visual LANSA Framework, or the VLF. Again, that's LANSA's instant back-office application framework, again, for delivering back-office, line-of-business web applications for your power users. All right, so I lied. There's actually one more myth I'd like to tackle. It's probably one of the biggest misconceptions out there, and that's that you need to be a genius to build today's modern web apps. Now, sure, if you decide to take the traditional path of learning and dealing with 6 to 10 web technologies on a daily basis, then yes, web development can be very difficult. But if you're willing to look at alternatives like LANSA per se, then web development doesn't have to be difficult. And here's what I find to be great about LANSA. So if you're already an expert in web development, then you'll appreciate the speed and the ease at which you can get things done with LANSA. But if you're not an expert, you're going to enjoy the fact that we've helped level the playing field by allowing you to deliver the same expert-level applications as those who are experts in a dozen different web technologies. Now, Einstein once said that imagination is more important than knowledge. And with LANSA, you can let your imagination run wild because we will remove all the technical hurdles that stand in the way of you being able to build the web applications that your users want and your company needs. Now, we're very confident in our technology, and we're willing to take on any and all challengers. So we're offering a special promotion called the LANSA Challenge, where we'll come in and we'll build a front office or a back office single-page web application as a proof of concept to prove to you how easy it is to build enterprise-class web applications with LANSA. So if you're interested, I've put some contact details up here on the screen. If you like what you saw today, it's just a great way to see firsthand how to build stunning web applications for your organization. All right, so that's it for us. I've put some contact information up on the screen along with some URLs for additional information on the products you saw here today. I would like to thank Steve Will for joining us today. At LANSA, we applaud IBM for bringing so many great web technologies to this platform. We try to leverage as many of them as we can so you don't have to. Thanks, Tom, again, for the great demo, and thank you for your time today. And remember, if you're thinking about moving to the web, or maybe you want to get a little more adventurous with your web applications, you're going to have to learn something new. So why not give LANSA a chance? You won't be disappointed. So again, thanks again. Janine, back over to you.
Thank you, David. We are out of time for today, so I want to let everyone know that we will be sending out a follow-up email early next week with a link to the recorded webinar as well as to some of these contact links so that you can get more information on what you saw today. And thank you to those of you who have submitted questions. I'd like to invite you, if you'd be generous enough, David and Tom, to stay with us for a few more moments and invite you to go ahead and submit any last questions you have. We'll keep the event open and take additional questions in the Q&A panel, and we'll respond back to you with a written response. And otherwise, we'll follow up via an email if we don't get to all the questions. So thanks again, everybody. That concludes our webinar. Have a great day.